Okay, Chair Mizell.
Thank you. Alrighty, I call this meeting to order. The date is October 14th, 2021. Time is 6:04 p.m. This is a meeting of the City of Berkeley's Reimagining Public Safety Task Force. Pursuant to Section 3 of Executive Order N2920, issued by Governor Newsom on March 17, 2020, this meeting of the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force will be conducted exclusively through teleconference and Zoom video conference. Please be advised that pursuant to the executive order, and to ensure the health and safety of the public by limiting human contact that could spread the COVID-19 virus, there will be no physical meeting location available. Let's go ahead to roll call.
Commissioner Fine.
Present.
Commissioner Jigu. Vice Chair Chima.
Here.
Commissioner Blake. Commissioner Lindheim. Commissioner Ghosh.
Here.
Commissioner Hyatt.
Here.
Commissioner Malvito.
Here.
Chair Mizell.
Here.
Commissioner Opton.
Here.
Commissioner Moon. Commissioner Harger.
Commissioner Harger informed me she will not be here tonight.
Thank you. Noted. Commissioner Diaz. Commissioner Lutzker.
Here.
Commissioner Ho.
Here.
Commissioner Dangerfield.
Here.
And Commissioner Thompson.
Here.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Lindheim teaches till 7 o'clock, so I think he'll be on at 7.
Yes, he does very well with let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to public comments, I believe Vice Chair, was there a motion we wanted to make in terms of moving up into the subcommittee reports?
Yeah, Commissioner Ho has to always leave at 8, and she has a report from the gender violence subgroup. So if we could hear that before 8 o'clock, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll go ahead and motion to reorder the agenda. You think when it would be best just to put it up first and then continue?
Francis? Yeah,
Mr. Ho, do you have any preferences?
Sure, that would be great, just to get it out of the way. Thank you so much for accommodating me.
Okay, yeah, so I'll go ahead and motion to reorder the agenda to place the Alternative Solutions to Gender-Based Violence Subcommittee reports to the front of our agenda before the community town hall discussion from Nick Jr.
I'll second.
Okay. We can call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fine.
Yes.
Commissioner Jigu. Vice Chair Chima.
yes,
Commissioner Blake. Commissioner Lindheim. Commissioner Ghosh.
Yes.
Commissioner Hyde.
Yes.
Commissioner Malvito.
Yes.
Chair Mizell.
Yes.
Commissioner Opton. Commissioner Opton. Harger. Commissioner Diaz. Lutzker.
Yes.
Ho. Commissioner Ho.
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Dangerfield.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Motion stands.
Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead to public comment then.
We have two public comments, Chair. First one is John Kaner. You should be allowed to speak.
Hi, John Kaner. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Yes, we
you.
can hear
Yes,
you.
thank you.
Hi, John Kaner, CEO, Downtown Berkeley Association. It's been a while since I've attended the Reimagining Task Force meeting. I just want to give you an update on Berkeley businesses in the downtown. And I also wanted to thank the task force, the commission, and for the listening session that David Mohammed and his group conduct on June 2nd, a listening session, and to keep in mind the feedback from that session and other businesses as you move forward. I just wanted to share, these are still really tough times for Berkeley businesses, particularly in the downtown and Telegraph. We have seen our pedestrian counts come back from about 2/3 down. We're still about a third down without the office market, and the arts district still hasn't started up. We still aren't seeing the people in the downtown. We're also struggling with a number of encampments and obviously hoping to get those people into care at the Horizon Transitional Center and other locations. So, a lot of our businesses are still hanging on. We have a lot of vacancies. The mayor, as you may know, and the council approved another $50,000 for the business damage mitigation fund to help out businesses that have had vandalism and other damage, which we really appreciate. So just ask you to keep us in mind as you go forward. Excited to hear about the specialized care unit and work that that the city's doing on that. And but we also need to make sure we have our PD officers. By the way, the bike detail is fantastic. They've been doing great work, I think, in community policing, getting to know the community. So with that, that's all I have to say, and thank you very much.
Next, we have Carol Marasevich. You should be allowed to speak.
I presume.
Carol, are you there?
I presume that I will be able to make comment when the mobile crisis item comes up, as well as the alternatives item. And so essentially, I wanted to only comment on that and defer comment as long as I can make comment then. So I wanted clarification on that. But now that I've heard John Kaner speak, it was interesting that he referred to Horizon as the care center. It's a shelter. It's a very well put together shelter that really took into account people's privacy needs, no curfew. It's excellent in many respects, but it is definitely not a care center. And it's very clear there's a real lack of mental health resources available for homeless persons, and that is deeply, deeply needed during this time where, as John speaks, that people are transitioning under the sidewalk ordinance enforcement, under the RV ordinance enforcement. They need mental health supports. Many people need mental health supports to make those transitions, and they're not available to them. Again, that's all I want to say. I'm looking forward to the other items on your agenda and being able to comment on them, the mobile crisis and the alternatives, when those items come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That is it for public comment.
Thank you. Okay, let's move to approval of the minutes from our September 30th meeting. Any discussion for corrections, changes to the minutes? Seeing none, I'll motion to approve the minutes.
Second that.
You. Yes.
Commissioner Fine,
Yes.
Mr. Ajigu, Vice Chair Chima,
Yes.
Mr. Blake, Commissioner Linheim, Commissioner Ghosh,
Yes.
Commissioner Hyde,
Yes.
Commissioner Melville,
Yes.
Chair Mizell,
Yes.
Commissioner Upton,
Yes.
Commissioner Moon.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Harger, Commissioner Diaz, Commissioner Letzker,
Yes.
Commissioner Hope,
Yes.
Commissioner Dangerfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
I wasn't present last meeting, so I don't think I can vote.
Abstain. Thank you. Thank you. Motion stands. Approved agenda minutes.
Thank you. Right. Right before we go to the subcommittee reports, I guess first we should introduce and welcome our new youth commissioner, Nina Thompson. Glad to have you here with us. And if you'd like to share anything about yourself, feel free to do it now. If not, not try to put you on the spot, but we're happy to have you here. And please know that the chair and vice chair, really everyone on the task force can be reached out to as a resource on different topics within this process. So really happy to have you here, and feel free to share anything if you'd like.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, let's go ahead to the subcommittee reports. Base finance subcommittee.
Chair, just a point of correction. Have you moved all of the
Yes.
reports or just the gender-based violence report?
I just moved gender-based violence so we could accommodate if the
Okay.
time runs long.
So you're just asking for that report, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again, Chair, for accommodating me and calling this out of order. So our subcommittee, which is myself, Commissioner Ghosh, and Vice Chair Chima, we conducted our second listening session for providers. And as you might recall, we conducted our first session actually focused on alternative responses to domestic violence, sexual abuse, and human trafficking. This second session, which was held last week, focused on police response to those areas. And we just wanted to share some themes from the session. The first issue that was raised, or one of the issues that was raised, again, was language access. The question of who provides interpretation when police respond. One person noted, kind of the longstanding issue that we've heard in the advocacy community, which is an issue when family members or children interpret for the alleged victim or even for the alleged suspect. So that's one issue that came up. Another was training. That training for law enforcement around these areas should be regular, specialized, and trauma-informed. A third theme that I wanted to highlight is addressing the needs of people who are unhoused. And this question of how do services reach the unhoused, especially if they don't have access to a phone or their phone number changes frequently. So we are very interested in learning more about that and what gaps can be filled. And finally, the last theme that I want to highlight is the idea of institutionalizing collaboration. I definitely got the impression that there's existing collaboration between the Berkeley Police Department and the Domestic Violence Agency, but we want to dig in more to understand how police departments can regularly update their policies with advocacy groups and service providers, so in collaboration, and also have a forum to address any issues that come up. And so in terms of next steps, we have submitted a list of questions to the department to help us understand some of these issues, including language access and policies and trainings in these areas. And in November, we plan on having a draft report to share with this task force, which will include more details regarding the listening sessions we've hosted and other information we've gathered. And it will also include some of our recommendations. And that is it for my report. And Vice Chair Chima or Commissioner Ghosh, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I'm good, Bernali.
I'll just add that at the listening session, we had folks who work in Berkeley and also folks who work outside of Berkeley. And that was really, I guess, interesting to have an outsider's perspective of how we do things here. We do some things really well and other things, we need to sort of work on. I think in general, we heard positive things about the police department and the way at least the liaisons are working on domestic violence issues, but it was also very clear that the resources we provide are very, very underfunded. Like even the things we do that we know work are severely underfunded. And I think that came up again and again. We're just not doing enough. We just don't have enough resources just to support the work that's currently happening, so it can happen fully in the way it's imagined. It feels like we're sort of scraping by. So that was my impression. As we look at the notes more closely and come up with themes, that might change, but that's my current impression that I just wanted to share in terms of funding and how we serve folks who are not served by the police department because they don't want to call them, how we serve folks who are unhoused because we don't know how to contact them. There are also a lot of populations that we don't serve at all, who are falling through the gaps. So we have a lot to do. Thank you, Francis, for that report and the themes.
If I might, I actually just wanted to highlight one more thing that we heard in that when you're talking about domestic violence, safety is obviously paramount. And, there are some situations that while they might look like they're non-criminal in nature or not in need of any kind of intervention, they could actually be dangerous situations. And so, for example, a civil standby is a common service that some police departments offer, particularly where there's a restraining order in effect and the restrained person is asked to move out of the shared home and take belongings with them. And so when we're talking about a tiered dispatch system and we have this category of non-criminal services or incidents that police are responding to, there are going to be a number of situations where it involves domestic violence if we don't track it more than just tracking it by penal code section. So inevitably, you're going to have a DV situation in tier 1. And that's something I think we'll probably go more in depth in our report.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, and again, I know all of you already know this, but if there'd been any discussion about, the underreporting of domestic violence and other incidents of family violence.
I'm happy to try to answer that, and feel free to chime in, Vice Chair Chima or Commissioner Ghosh. Yes, you're always going to get underreporting. I mean, there are certainly providers that we weren't able to talk with yet, like providers that work with youth, specifically, or providers on UC Berkeley's campus. So, I mean, I think if we're reimagining kind of like one of the statistics that I think is accepted in the advocacy community is 1 in 4 women will be a victim or survivor of intimate partner abuse. You know, some say 1 in 3. So if you were to take Berkeley's population, right, and divide it by 25, like that's the number of people that you want at a minimum to have resources for, I guess would be my answer to that.
Thank you. And yeah, I'll definitely look forward to your report. All righty. If no one else from the subcommittee has anything, I appreciate the report, and you can go ahead to hearing from Nick Jr. and discussing our town hall schedule going forward. And please, I'm Cheryl, David Muhammad, good to see you. Amir, if there's a way to best help conduct this or manage this or have a discussion, please let me know. You know, I think we all eagerly awaiting the next steps in progress. So whatever works best, please let me know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair Mizell. So Cheryl is going to go over a brief presentation just with the timeline of the next steps, which include the community meetings, as well as the timeframe for submission of the draft final report and a feedback process. So I want to hand it over to Cheryl from SCGR.
Thanks, David. So as we move into this, the final report, I just kind of want to do a little bit of a recap of what we've been doing the last 6 months or so together. And so we did a series of reports, the community outreach, and then we're drafting the final report with continued community outreach and engagement. And so here is the overall timeline that we have. The preliminary reports, the final reports have all been delivered. The community engagement report and Commissioner Ho, thank you for that report and knowing when your report would be coming. So whatever we can put into the community engagement report in that final draft, we will certainly add to it. So I kind of left that as not quite a final yet. The final report, and I call it a final report because it's the culmination of all of the reports that we have been contracted to do. So it doesn't mean that it is on October 29th. It is over. It is the final report culminating all of the preliminary reports and the community engagement process. So that will be delivered to you and the city on October 29th. And then we will have 4 community meetings, and I'll go into those in a minute. We'll have 4 community meetings in November. And then the final report, we will need the final report feedback from the task force and the community no later than November 26th, because the city manager's office has asked us they would like to submit to present to the city council on December 2nd, because the city council goes into recess hiatus December 14th. So I believe that was the date that the city manager gave us, and we can discuss that with the city manager's office if that is a flexible date before the 14th. So for the community meetings, which is kind of the final spoke in community engagement, we've divided it up. In speaking to the mayor's office and the city manager's office, we have divided it up into 3 different areas of Berkeley. So we will do 3 virtual gatherings and 1 in-person gathering, respecting our COVID protocols, understanding that we're not in a position to have all in-person gatherings, but we want to try to pull as much information and gather as much input and feedback as we can. So we will do South and West, districts 1, 2, and 3, North Berkeley, Berkeley Hills, Elmwood area, districts 5, 6, and 8, and then the campus area districts 4 and 7. NICJR will facilitate those virtual meetings. The city council members will help engage their districts and invite their districts, so we have a really strong turnout. And opportunity during these virtual meetings is to have breakout rooms so that we can pull people into a smaller, more intimate setting. Some people may feel safer than in a room full of 150 people asking questions. So we will create the safest, most engaging process as possible. And then we will have there will be a fourth in person that the mayor has asked for. And so I think that in-person gathering is an opportunity for the task force to engage populations that may not have access to the internet, may not feel comfortable in engaging in a virtual. So we can discuss what that can look like. But because these will happen November 4 Tuesdays in a row, November 9th, 16th, 23rd, and 30th, I think it could be a good idea for the community engagement subcommittee and the task force as a whole to discuss what those look like and start planning the outreach and your input on that outreach as well. And that is what I have to share with you.
And Cheryl, can you talk a little bit about the feedback process?
Sure. So the feedback process in the final, there are a couple ways that we want to do it. In the final report, there will be a list of recommendations, and it will be sort of we will pull together those recommendations outside of the narrative and explanations and the preliminary reports that have been pulled together with your input. We will have a spreadsheet of the recommendations, and I will put a form together that either individually or through the subcommittees that you can provide feedback on the individual recommendation. So it's sort of broken down in a little more detail for you to provide feedback. We're creating an 800 number for community members who, again, may not feel safe or comfortable coming to a listening session or a community meeting. So that 800 number will be up for the 3 weeks, almost a month that it is, to leave feedback on that number as well.
Thank you, Cheryl. And so the draft final plan and the final report and implementation plan will, like I said, come at the end of October. We'll have a simultaneous process of receiving task force feedback as well as community feedback through these series of meetings. And we really would love to partner with task force members of how we increase attendance at these both virtual meetings, but we'd love to really partner with the task force in terms of the in-person meeting and how do we continue to engage. And we've talked to a couple of community partners about trying to particularly focus on communities who might not have access to a virtual platform to participate in the virtual meetings. And so we look forward to talk about the potential partnership with the task force on how we would do that. And then pulling all of this feedback together to make amendments to the final draft final report and implementation plan to be able to meet the December, I think it's the December 3rd special meeting of the City Council, December 2nd, Thursday, December 2nd City Council meeting, at which point we would not consider that submission to be the end of it either, that we would continue to receive feedback and provide a final report. Just one last thing before we just go to some questions and discussion is, as an example, I know, I think in a previous meeting, I can't remember, maybe with the co-chairs, a discussion about how did feedback happen in other processes that we've been involved in, like in Fresno and Oakland. And in those processes, we had interim reports to the City Council in both of those instances. And then there were, further iterations. So we can talk more about that if there is, if there's interest there.
Thank you. No, really appreciate it, and I look forward to the conversation. If Sarah or David, if you have any particular way you'd like to run this.
I mean, I think that with the hands raised, I think we can sort of start with questions and see where we go from there, see where that leads us. So maybe Commissioner Go.
Okay, I'll let you go ahead and take the lead if that's okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify. you're having there's 3 community meetings and they are targeted towards particular districts, but are they limited to those districts?
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Commissioner
Yeah.
Ghost. So they're more targeted than limited. What we have experienced in doing this, and also we've talked to a couple of other jurisdictions who've done things like this. It's hard to limit it virtually, and not a lot of reason to try to impose that, right? And so we want to target those areas, but not limit it, and we want to engage the city council members in those districts to help get the word out.
Okay. And I guess the reason I asked that is because otherwise it looks like only 1 community meeting for each, rather than you're doing 3, which 3 opportunities. And maybe the community participation task group can speak to this, but I'm wondering if they should be on different days of the week rather than all on the same day of the week to get greater coverage.
That's a good point.
And then in terms of commissioners attending, I'm just wondering how we deal with like quorum issues if they come up. Like I'm happy to like RSVP to a meeting. If I don't know how to do that. It's a pretty big commission, so we may not reach quorum as easily, but just in case. But I live in North Berkeley and I'd love to be part of that meeting if possible, if it works. So yeah, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
So I think Commissioner Ghosh, this is LaTanya, staff will handle kind of ensuring that a quorum, there's no violation of the Brown Act. And so we'll probably do an RSVP type process to the point you just made, and we'll make certain that each commissioner is notified. I think the number to get to a violation is 9 for this group, I think at one time. And so, but I do think yet and still it is something we should manage, but staff will handle that for you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm just going to go down my participant list. So Commissioner Malvito.
Hey, everyone. This sounds really interesting. I can't wait. I have just a couple of questions about the virtual one and the in-person one, and maybe a solution to the quorum situation. I know that you're thinking about breaking up by respective districts, and I'm wondering if there's any interest for commissioners that either live in those districts or are appointed by council members who are in those districts specifically should take priority in being a part of those specific ones. And then if anyone else wants to join, they are second on the list, I guess. I don't know if there's any opposition to that, but I think that would be a good solution. I guess I'm interested in, I saw that city council members and the mayor, or, they would be somewhat a part of it. I'm wondering what would their role be in the town hall?
Yeah, we were more thinking helping to get the attendance, that being the primary role, like to use their email listservs to, yeah.
Okay, got it. Great. And I guess I hope that the in-person, or sorry, the virtual one, at least the one in District 2, but all of them really, there is possibility to provide language interpretation for Spanish speaking at least. And finally, I guess if we were able to look at the questions and maybe the structure of the town halls themselves, I feel like a lot of public safety town halls that have happened in the past, this is not a critique on any elected official in particular, but they feel very much not like town halls, especially the virtual ones. It just kind of feels like a lecture and there's not much of engagement. And I know that it's a very political topic and people have different opinions and we need to manage that. But I guess what are some of the things that you're all interested in doing to make it feel like a real authentic engagement space?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. So 2 quick pieces. One, part of it will be presentation because we're going to present trying to balance not being a bunch of talking at people and lecturing people, but also providing them a good overview of the draft plan so that they can respond to it and give input. But it'll also be out in public at that time. So folks will hopefully have the opportunity to review it, but we also don't expect people who have read the whole thing before coming to the meeting. So we want to do some sort of presenting an overview of it, and then really having facilitated discussion, which will also include breakouts so people could have more time and intimate space to talk in smaller groups. But that's one, we want it really for it to be facilitated discussion, mostly with starting with the presentation overview of the plan.
And if I can piggyback on that, especially on the translation, I think, I don't know if you guys feel best that it comes from the community engagement subcommittee, or if district commissioners want to share with me what languages that you really feel are important to have interpretation on, that we will add as many as possible to accommodate those challenges. And I think in the overview, it's also an opportunity for us to talk about the work that the task force has done over 6 months and really highlight the work that these 17 people have done to get to this point. So that people can also so I appreciate the recommendation, Commissioner Malvito, that the district appointed commissioners can be there to also be a face to recognize and acknowledge the work that you all have done.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm muted. Commissioner Fine?
What is this presentation going to include? That's my first question. I have a second question as well. Does it include the Tier 1 dispatch and the CERN?
It'll be an overview of the final report.
Okay. I grew up here. I've known people in the North Hills for almost my 58 years. And I have a lot of concerns about that. And I went through all your reports last week, and I went and extended it into research on the downtown ambassadors. And I really almost think this Tier 1 dispatch and the CERN, the way it's structured, particularly with the citywide coordination system, is a reinvestment in policing and an extension of the department. The downtown ambassadors, if you look up their contracts under the city of Berkeley, use Street Plus. And if you go to their websites, it lists their services, which are patrol services, including electronic monitoring services. It says one of the most important tasks is interacting with individuals committing quality of life infractions, and that they have a strategic partnership with law enforcement and work closely with the police and peacemakers. And that concerns me considerably. And I'm also concerned because in the slides, it showed that you would be hiring 24 community responders, but we have no job description or any idea what those roles are. So somebody who has not done all the research I've done, or that other people who have been on the task force are aware of, doesn't know this and sees them as the website on Street Plus is just cleaning up and beautifying and all that, when a lot of technology and interaction is being used with law enforcement. And I thought the CERN before last week was not just going to focus on the downtown ambassadors, the UCB community safety officers, and the MCT. I thought it was going to be all those CBOs that were listed in Appendix C and E of the alternative responses report. So what's potentially going to be presented in all these citywide meetings is a model that I don't think has been unpacked in a way that people really understand the connection and the role with law enforcement.
Yeah, that's the type of exchange we hope to have in the communities, but there'll be a lot more, as we've said, in the final report, including job descriptions. So folks will have an opportunity to unpack it.
Well, don't you feel like you need to do that now with the task force so that we get this straightened out?
We'll certainly have the opportunity to do that when we present, because there'll be a lot more information. For instance, I mean, this is not the subject matter, so I don't want to deviate from the subject matter. I wholly disagree with your assertions that you just made. And so but you will have more information when the draft is released that clarifies some of that.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutzker.
Hi, thank you. So I have some concerns around the timeline here. It does seem really fast, and it seems I know that the city manager is wanting the report by a certain time. I think it's fine to have task force input at the same time as we're having community input. I do, to Commissioner Fine's point, I do think that there's a lot of explanation that needs to be, and kind of education about the details of what's being proposed, so that people actually know what is being proposed, like in a really detailed way, a way that I have not seen in most of the reports that have come out of Nick Jr. so far. And I do have a concern, though, of this like very short turnaround time between when our comments go in and then council is hearing things. My experience so far with the reports is that we've provided comments and then we've needed to then follow up on those comments because they haven't been adequately addressed. So I am concerned that there isn't time for our input, responses from Nick Jr., and then also continued responses from us. So that's one concern. The other thing that I just want to really be clear in the reports, because it's something that I've been struggling with this whole time, and I think others will also struggle with it, is clarifying the scope of the report. As I said, I'm feeling like this, the tiered dispatch model is the core of this, but there's a lot of things that haven't been talked about in the Nick Jr. reports, like things around what about other parts, other parts of BPD that are not, that don't revolve around calls for service. I've mentioned things like, as you know, focused on things like school crossing guards, things like parking enforcement officers, things like traffic control for events, right? These are all transportation related, but there's kind of been no discussion around those because they don't relate to calls for service. There was one small thing around collision response, but that's the only thing. So I don't know whether these things, and this is just in the small world of transportation that I'm very acutely aware of. And I'm sure there are many, many other things that BPD does that don't revolve around calls for service. And I want Nick Jr. to be extremely clear about what the scope of the report is, because people can comment on the recommendations, but there also needs to be a place for people to comment on what has not been recommended. And if the scope is not incredibly clear, not just what the scope is, but why the scope is what it is, whether that's direction from City Council, whether that was Nick Jr.'s decision, why is the scope limited in the way that it is? And I think some of the questions that you'll get is, if it's not directed by City Council, why did Nick Jr. choose to limit the scope in the way that you did? But I think that there should be a very lengthy section on scope before you even get into the recommendations, so you don't get people questioning things, or if there are questions, they are about why the scope was what it was. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think we will address those. I think they'll be addressed in the final report, and I think sort of it's an ongoing discussion as we move forward. But yeah, I do think that they will be addressed.
I am wondering about from city staff about that turnaround for the timeline. I don't know whether, because I do worry that that's just, a very, between what did you say, November 29th, and it's being presented on this.
Well, you will get it on October 29th, and then it will be, and then we need feedback by November 26th.
Right,
And-
but I'm wondering, like, will you respond to feedback before then? And is there this iterative process, which I think is really critical?
Well, and I think that one of the things that David was talking about was that this, to your point, and I appreciate that, is that including in the feedback, what are the things that are not included in the report, right? What are the things that haven't been addressed that need to be addressed? So I think a couple of things that you said was, in the listening sessions, in my opinion, some of what may come from the listening sessions is information about what needs to be done moving forward, right? And I think David mentioned that what the city council receives on December 2nd does not have to be the end. So, right, so part of what I think the task force can talk about and look at in the final report and in that feedback is what needs to be done moving forward. And I anticipate that, and I think to Commissioner Fine's point about what we may or may not hear from the listening sessions is that there is a need for more information, right? And so we need to present something in December to the city council. And what is needed in addition to that. Does that make sense? Chair Chima?
That be vice chair. A couple of things are going to happen. One, that we as a task force have yet to make a decision as to how we're going to provide feedback. Are we going to do it through our subcommittees, or are we going to have 4 meetings in October so the whole task force can respond to the narrative as well as the recommendations? I am waiting patiently to see the report. I'm making no assumptions as to what will be in the report, what will not be in the report, but because things could have changed since the last time you gave us the reports. I'm sure that, progress is made all along. So that one decision has to be made. And then so the 4 days between November when you receive the last feedback, that gives you like 4 days to get it in front of the council. And then once the presentation is made to the council will have a lot of their own questions at that meeting, because no report in the city is just presented without, council and the mayor responding, saying, we understand this, we don't understand, what made you want to do this. They have their own process so you will be receiving feedback on the 2nd and ongoing, because there might be questions from the mayor and the council that might not have been answered in the report. So by no means am I seeing the process ending December the 2nd. Actually, in some ways, it begins because that's when we get into the implementation phases. So I would say that at our that 2nd October meeting, do we have a date for that? That we agendize how the task force is going to work on this report, who is going to take which sections, which subcommittees are going to report to which parts of the report. The task force doesn't have a plan for how we're going to provide input, and we definitely need to develop that plan and have that discussion. And maybe we can put it on the October agenda, but we need to have our plan. What our dates are going to be, what our timeline is. Are we going to try and get everybody's comments and then create one document and give that to Nick Jr. to, hopefully that they will take all our recommendations and include them in theirs, because that would be absolutely fantastic. But I think we all need to be mindful that in those 30 days that we will have a lot of work to do. And we need to start getting ready for that. So, and I clearly understand that city staff is not going to have the time to facilitate or put together 4 meetings for the task force. So either this conversation needs to go to the subcommittees and have a very quick conversation about how we're going to provide feedback. I like the idea of a template that, all the recommendations are listed and folks can rewrite or at the end add their recommendations. So I'm looking for that for us to create our own process of review and input.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I think that is all right. And I think to respect everybody's time availability, what is the best way to get feedback and divide up the responsibilities of covering everything? And so there, there are concessions along the way, right? But I think going to the subcommittees may be the best way to cover everything and recognize everybody's limited capacity as well.
Two quick things. One, you said it, Mr. Chima, around the template. We'll provide that template, and then obviously the task force has, it's your discretion to use it or not, or use it. And the other piece is I don't forgot who brought this up, but our commitment will try to respond as soon as we get input, to try to respond to that as soon as possible, to make it an iterative process. That may meaning that might not be, here's an update to the whole report based upon that feedback. It might be in that template that we're responding to it. So our commitment is to try to do that so that you're seeing we're both responding to the feedback and amending the reports as necessary.
And also one other thing that I want all of us to think about is, do we provide feedback as the task force, or do we give you feedback as the task force and then 17 other individual feedbacks from each task force member? So I think that the time has come for the task force to make some very, very important decisions. So we do our part of this effort.
And does the task force want to have a portion of the report, right? Or a report, or however, right?
We haven't even had that discussion, so.
Right.
So if I could just chime in there, just right on that point, Vice Chair Chima, one of the thoughts, because you all have done so much great work and you've been working at this for quite some time, and you are appointed by the individual council members, is on that, again, it's going to be a special meeting, not tied to any other council meeting, but on that, actually agendizing the task force to speak and give your feedback and report, and however you all want to do that. But there is an intention to provide some space on the agenda for the task force to speak. So it will be the report from Nick Jr. They will be on there, of course, but also the task force will be on there as well. So between you, the chair, and the vice chair can identify who you like to speak and present on behalf of the task force to ensure that all of the work that you've done here is also recognized in front of the council. So just to offer that as you're considering. Thank you.
Thank you, LaTanya. Commissioner Ho?
Thanks, Cheryl. So in terms of providing as much access as we can to community members to weigh in, I was really happy to hear that there's going to be an 800 number for folks to leave a message. I'm wondering if an email address could also be an option, because I think there are going to be people that would feel more comfortable doing that. I'm probably one of them. What it would also help to create that record. It's in writing, and so I don't know for the voice messages if those would be transcribed. And I think another way in making the information more accessible and letting community members think about whether they want to respond is maybe if Nick Jr. would entertain the idea of recording, so let's say your presentation is going to take 10 to 15 minutes. You record it ahead of time, we get it posted, people can watch it at their leisure, and if they have strong feelings, they might go to a community meeting. If they don't, they may not, and they might choose to just say, do a quick survey or send an email, right? There could be some easy way for them to say, yeah, this sounds good. But I'm just wondering, I think it would be helpful for some people too to have that information ahead of time so that they can really digest it and think about and not just be reacting in that, in that short time period that they have for the community meeting. And then in terms of providing the materials and the sessions in different languages, I was just actually looking at census data, and it looks like 30% of Berkeley residents who filled out those surveys say that they speak language other than English. And so I'm wondering if maybe the city could provide that information. I'm sure the city has it. And I was surprised that the largest group, obviously all lumped together, was the Asian and Pacific Islander group, about 14% versus Spanish, which is about 8%, according to the census data, of course. So, but yeah, I think the city should be able to provide you with that information in terms of language needs in our community.
Thank you. Commissioner Fine.
I just had a couple questions because I had also submitted a memo in late August. I shared it very, very widely, and I was told I was going to hear the feedback from it, but I never did. And then tonight, you know, I've raised another issue, and I'm kind of wondering if I'm going to get feedback and unpacking it. And these are things that I researched. They're in contracts, they're in websites. And, you know, if you disagree, that's great, but I would really like to hear what the response is, so I'm very clear about what is going on here. I know, for instance, in the memo I wrote, I asked about the calls for service analysis with, for instance, mental health and SUD and homeless and wellness checks, which can get very blurry. And I am in the process of getting the materials from the police department, but I know we can say we're not going to address non-penal or penal calls, but what about these messier calls? And so I have an expectation that prior to releasing a final report, we're having a very deep conversation about what these things mean and sifting out what is service delivery and what is looking like policing. So there isn't a bunch of confusions because the documents out there look quite different. And when you go to that Street Plus website, there are pictures of the downtown ambassadors from Berkeley in several places. So it looks like we are doing their advertising as well.
Now, everything you just said, I totally agree with that. So the messy calls, that's incredibly important and absolutely accurate.
We're talking about
piece. And so two things. One, I know this isn't slightly off topic, but so there was a question answer thing we did that we submitted, I assumed went to the task force, but it sounds like from what you're saying, Commissioner Fine, that it didn't. So we'll double check on that because we thought we gave answers to those questions that you submitted. And then yes, those pieces will be in the final report. One thing I'll say, I know this in the subject, but I do think that some of the things are so messy, meaning there's a difference sometimes between what's get called in and what's the reality. And that's what the pilot will begin to work out, right? To begin to learn better what you get when you arrive on the scene. That being said, we'll have a lot more detail in the draft report. But immediately, what I'll do now off scene is try to figure out what happened in terms of the answers to those questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Opton.
I want to provide a strong second for the comments of Commissioner Chima. I think she's right on track, on target, and we should act accordingly. I want to point out that it's important that the task force be able to communicate to the City Council independently of the consultant. We should realize that the consultant has interests in this matter that are not the same as those of the commissioners. The consultants presumably want to be hired for future consulting jobs by the company and by others. And that gives them a strong interest in saying the things that they think the City Council would like to hear, and in refraining from saying things that might make the City Council and potential other municipal customers uncomfortable. We, as the commissioners, don't have that kind of commercial and self-interest. So we should make sure that we get to say what we think directly to the city council.
Thank you, Commissioner Opton. Chair Mizell?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think Vice Chair Chima said what was going to be my first point better than me. So I'll move on to, I guess, my own more personal question about this process. But I guess a concern I've had since the beginning would be, how, a basic background of information as to how this task force came to be and the reasons as to why, which I think would be critical, for any member of the public to understand, why are we even doing this? What has been the issue with the status quo? And obviously to some level that obviously goes into a political realm. But to me, there's things that are just simply factual. I mean, it's simply factual that police reform, for instance, has been over 100-year effort in the United States, as y'all know. It's just the fact that there was first the Wickersham Commission, which spoke about police brutality in America back in 1921. They wrote it, came out in 1931, which would sound eerily familiar to today. Y'all know the Kerner Commission report as well. I spoke to Show earlier about that report and its importance and how a group of largely old white guys were able to understand that the problems that pervaded from the police was not really just the police. It was the very institutions in their own description of white society. So I guess what I'm getting at has there been any thought into, a basic background into, what have the issues been in the past? What was the impetus behind creating a task force like this, and why it's important?
So yes, and two things. One, we wrote something like that exactly for the City of Oakland's report, and we're halfway through the draft on that, including some of those great points. But yes, I think the context, that wasn't just one incident that happened 2,000 miles away, right? That is part of it, but there is local context. And, because we did hear from some people that, oh, just because this horrible thing happened 2,000 miles away, why are we being caught up into police reform, right? So that was some feedback we heard. And we're saying, no, there's absolutely local context. That'll be a part of it for sure.
Okay, now I look forward to that. And yeah, I think it's critical on policing, and obviously, beyond policing, which I know you know as well, because, often the rhetoric you'll hear is folks pointing to, symptoms of fundamental root problems that have remained within, the city, the region, the country, for, in some cases, centuries, and have not really changed. But instead, what gets blamed is the symptom of the issue. Why are we doing this? Because I see the symptom, so just fix that one symptom over there, and or push it out of mind so I don't have to think about it, and nothing else. Because sometimes that's all folks know. So I'm on a tangent now. This. I'm looking forward to it, and I know we'll have more discussion about what that looks like.
Yeah, and I think that there is some national context, and then there's always, in every city that we work with, there is a national context, to your point of the history of the country. And then because some people can feel disconnected from that, right? So how does that context of this whole country history affect me in this silo that I am in? And we kind of talk about the local context as well. Commissioner Ghosh.
Sorry to be back, but I guess I'm hoping that, especially with the community meetings, I love Commissioner Ho's suggestion of recording previously and providing that so people have time to digest it. I love Chair Meisel's idea of like providing some background to remind people why we're doing this and what the framing is and what kind of feedback you're looking for. I really wish and I hope that you can be creative in the way that that meeting is conducted. I participate mostly in community meetings connected with planning and housing and our meetings related to the BART station. Um, I found that the use of surveys, while we were there, the use of like sort of virtual post-its, trying to recreate some of the things we do when we're in-person meetings. And so it's not just people talking, like even us, I wish our meetings we could facilitate more creatively so it didn't prioritize those of us like me who are very comfortable speaking, not so comfortable writing, right? So how if y'all can come up with some way to sort of break the ice, to solicit feedback in ways that are creative, solicit feedback in a way that can actually provide guidance. I think again Commissioner Ho's point of like a thumbs up, thumbs down type of thing, or not sure, something that we get somewhere at the end of that community meeting, that we don't just open all the boxes and close nothing, that people walk away feeling some sense of either being heard or us together feeling some sense of accomplishment. So I want you all to think a little more deeply about other ways in which you can facilitate those meetings that are not just about taking comment from people. So that's my hope, but yeah.
No, thank you, Commissioner Ghosh. I mean, I think that, look, this is a challenge that we've experienced in this process with community engagement. And it's a challenge that we have in this virtual world. So I completely hear that, and we will be as creative as possible, and recognizing that we want to create safe spaces as well as open spaces. I wanted to take a quick minute before I go back to a few people who have their hands raised. If there are any commissioners that sort of haven't spoken or asked anything yet, if there's anything that you'd like to ask, please unmute yourself or raise your hand, and we'd love to hear from you. I will go back to my hands over here. Commissioner Opton.
Yes, Mr. Mohammed mentioned a report that you all have done for the city of Oakland. And so I want to ask, can that report be made available to us?
Sure. Yep. The reports that we have done in both Oakland and Fresno are on our website, but we can send the link to them to the city and to the task force so that everybody has access to them.
Thank you. I think that could be very helpful.
Commissioner Fine.
Why don't you let Vice Chair Chima go? Because I've spoken a couple times.
Vice Chair Chima.
I was going to make a couple of suggestions. One, I think it's really important that while we're having these town halls in the districts of city council folks, that we request that they might want to be present to welcome people from the districts, but not to say in too much, because that can sort of sway people in certain directions. Another piece that you could add that would humanize it is that those of us who were appointed in districts, that we attend our district and in a minute or say I've saved, thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve on this task force. We've worked very hard, and just sort of warm it up a little bit. So a couple of, like Bernali was saying, let's humanize this a little bit more than just what we've been doing for 2 years now. Thank you.
No, I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
And let me just say, there's a couple of new nice platforms that we've been trying to work with. Jamboard, there's a few others that give that type of ability to do that. So we'll certainly try to do that for these.
Commissioner Fine, then Commissioner Opton, and then Chair Mizell. I think it's all yours.
I was just gonna say, I think, in presenting, you have to really peel back the layers. And like right now in Berkeley, some of the things that are coming up have a lot to do with the role of technology. And you might hear tier one dispatch and CERN and say, oh, great, we're gonna have community responders, blah, blah, blah. But underlying it, you really have to talk to also about the role of technology and how that can connect to other systems, because right now we're also dealing with the role of surveillance and social control, and people may not perceive that right away, but that's definitely a form of criminology. I don't know, I have my master's in this area, and I think that when we do presentations and stuff, that's like a piece that needs to come out. I mean, I got that out of the documents I was reading, but I don't think it naturally comes out from just putting up the slides about, which offenses we are not going to have the police address and so forth.
Right. Are we just shifting oversight from humans to technology?
Yeah.
Yeah. Vice Chair Chima? Or is your hand still?
I'm sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
All right, Chair Mizell, thank you for a great discussion and that feedback. We will, I would like to connect with the community engagement subcommittee about the community meetings and see how we can gather support and input from you as well. So I'll reach out to you separately, but I'll take this input and create the platform.
Great. No, thank you for facilitating this discussion. Obviously, the presentation. I think we all anxiously await the draft report, and really because it gives us something we can all start working on and start discussing. So I'm looking forward to it. I know we're all looking forward to it. And yeah, thank you for this discussion. And yeah, I'm pretty sure I'll be at the campus district 4, district 7 meeting. So if we got district 4, district 7, there'll probably be 3 people. We'll be fine, but I'll be there, and I look forward to it. So thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, we will go ahead in our agenda then.
Chair, do you think we can do public comment?
Public
Yes,
comment.
thank
Every
you.
time.
Every
Thank
time,
you.
no worries, I got it. Give me 1 second. I am bringing in Emily Raguso. Should be able to speak.
Thank you. Just a quick thought, and thank you all for the discussion. I was just thinking about how with EIRs and documents like that, there's a whole section at the end that includes kind of all the public feedback that's been provided. And I know there's been discussion of different memos, commissioners, and emails that may come in. It would be nice, I would appreciate some kind of appendix that actually had the public feedback to the extent possible, so that it was all compiled in one place. And I also want to second what I believe it was Commissioner Ghosh said about the BART housing meetings, and how those planning meetings have been really engaging with the different breakout rooms and some different ways to interact. So those are a great model to look at if anyone has a chance. But thank you all for your work and for taking the time to hear me.
Next, we have Carol Marasevich. Carol,
I agree. I agree that the report should be posted in advance on the website with sufficient time for community members to look at it in advance of the community meetings. Otherwise, you won't receive really adequate input. And it seems as if not only the consultants' recommendations, but the task forces should have recommendations that are also posted. However, it doesn't seem as if there's time to do that, to discuss each item independently that is in the consultants' recommendations and have adequate discussion and take a vote on it and put it forward to the community to see. with possibly also after you've taken a vote with dissenting opinions too. And so I'm uncomfortable with this. It seems like this community input is coming very late and too close before it goes to council. I have a question. If the community provides a certain type of feedback, are the consultants then going to change the recommendations that go to council, or will there merely be a summary? These are some of the things that we heard during this session. So are you going to be changing your recommendations? Now, if I understand correctly, you're having these community input sessions like 1, 2, and 3 are grouped together, and 5, 6, and 8 are grouped together. And certainly there's some commonalities between districts, but there's also distinctions. And so it seems as if there aren't enough community input sessions, one for each district. For example, in District 2 recently, when meeting with District 2 constituents, the council member chose to have one meeting in West Berkeley and one meeting in South Berkeley, and they were very, very different meetings and very different community input. There was even a distinction there just within one district. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will have Kelly Hammergren. You should be allowed to speak, Kelly.
Thank you. I've been attending these meetings now for a number of months, and it always feels like the end recommendation and report is preordained, and that the task force is here, but it just always feels like the task force really isn't given the opportunity to do much work. And I've heard before, well, you do it in the subcommittees, but it just feels like the whole thing's orchestrated, and I'm really disappointed that it feels that way. And I hate being a broken record about that, but as an observer of these meetings, this is my conclusion. And then when you talk about surveillance, I just finished Roger McNamee's book, Zuck, today on Facebook, and that certainly has framed how I look at surveillance. Thank you.
Chair Mizell, that is it for public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now we are ready to move on to the next item on our agenda. We will hear from Dr. Lisa Varhus, and there you are, Dr. Varhus. Thank you for being here with us. We can go right into your presentation.
Good evening, commissioners, task force members, sorry. It's really great to see you again. My name is Lisa Varhus, and I am the director of the Health, Housing, and Community Services Department with the City of Berkeley. I am also the staff lead for the Specialized Care Unit Planning, and I think more importantly, the facilitator of the steering committee for the Specialized Care Unit. I am here today with my colleague, Jeff Buell, who is the manager of the Berkeley Mental Health Mobile Crisis Team, as well as the Transitional Outreach Team and the Community Assessment Team. I'm here specifically in my role as HHCS Director to answer questions that this task force had specifically regarding the current mobile crisis unit. We have shared via correspondence the questions and answer, but if Jeff and I may quickly just present for the task force members and for the community the Q&A, and then we're happy to take any questions about mobile crisis following. So I can share my screen. But it's not sharing the right thing. Hold on just a second. Please bear with me. Okay, it's not working for me. So I'm not sharing the correct document. Are you able to see the PowerPoint, or now you should be able to?
We can
Are you
see it
able to
now.
see that?
Yeah, now we can.
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just learning how to share my screen and look at my notes at the same time. We will just run quickly through the questions with our answers. We'll do it back and forth between us. So Jeff will take the first question. I'll read him off. How is mobile crisis activated? In other words, is it through dispatch system, or do people call mobile crisis directly?
All right, so for this first one, the mobile crisis team can be contacted through the dispatch system or through a direct phone message. When contacting through dispatch, the caller can report a need and whether it is urgent or not. Urgent calls are dispatched immediately, and Berkeley Police will be activated, and mobile crisis will be activated if they're available. Mobile crisis is not available. Berkeley Police will respond to the urgent call without mobile crisis. A non-urgent call to dispatch can request that mobile crisis call them back to consult, just like a direct voicemail to mobile crisis. So mobile crisis can activate or go to a field call after being sent there by the dispatch system, or they can activate themselves by calling dispatch after consulting on the phone with a community member. Either way, the dispatch system is involved in the activation of the mobile crisis team.
Thank you, Jeff. And if it's okay, we'd like to run through the responses to these questions before taking specific follow-ups, so I'm worried we're going to get ahead of ourselves. So the second question was, how do you measure impact of effectiveness? For example, by comparing days mobile crisis is available versus not. And so we have been informally measuring impact for some time, but we are actually still developing more formal process. We're actually, the mental health division is in the process of finalizing a set of outcome measures as part of the division-wide effort to set results-based accountability measures for all of our internal program, and that is actually part of a department-wide initiative. However, informally, over many years, we've looked at the following items to get a sense of effectiveness. Feedback from community stakeholders, like the Mental Health Commission, community groups, et cetera. Feedback from clients that we serve. Feedback from internal stakeholders, City of Berkeley divisions, Berkeley PD. We've looked at the percentage of calls, 5150 calls that lead to a transport for or to a receiving station. The lower the better. This means more diversion. This could mean that a higher rate of low acuity calls are being referred to mobile crisis rather than a static acuity level of referrals being diverted to lower levels of care. So in a perfect world, we would want to measure things like percent of mental health crisis calls that involve a MCT response, but we don't have the dispatch data currently to be able to do this. So I'll move to the next question. What services do people need that are not currently available in Berkeley? And Jeff will respond to that.
So that's actually a really big question. It's a good question. From a crisis perspective, it's important to understand that the City of Berkeley services are focused on individuals who are eligible for Medi-Cal, and that these services are part of the Alameda County Behavioral Health Care Plan. We don't operate separately, but as part of that larger network. So that being said, some of the needs identified in Berkeley include having more permanent housing, more permanent supportive housing, more transitional housing, having more acute and subacute settings where individuals in crisis can get care, having more options for individuals who are primarily experiencing substance use disorder crises. And places like that might be sobering centers or treatment for stimulants. Having easier access to psychiatry services, having more Medi-Cal eligible therapy provider options, pretty big. Having more mental health prevention resources to promote resilience and prevent crises in the first place. Just some examples.
We'd love to be able to do more upstream work. The fourth question asked of us is, how is mobile crisis activated? Is it, that's a mistake, I think. I'm gonna have to go back. Actually, I'm gonna find the actual fourth question because I think we already addressed that question. Okay, So the question was, do you provide case management meaning track clients who need intensive services? And if not, how do you coordinate services for a person who needs them? So crisis services is one of 3 branches of Berkeley Mental Health Services. It's not much, it's not a big part of what we do actually. And the other 2 are adult services and family, youth, and children's services. And this encompasses the mobile crisis team, transitional outreach team, and crisis access and triage. So mobile crisis team will see clients during field calls, and the TOT is available to follow up after the crisis has passed to offer linkage to longer-term services if the client is not already connected. So this linkage can include short-term case management to reconnect the client to previous services. The CAT team is the entry points for clients who are interested in getting linked to longer-term services through Berkeley Mental Health, including residents who may qualify for a lower referral of service that Berkeley Mental Health provides. The CAT team provides engagement, assessment, information, and referrals to mental health services with and outside of Berkeley Mental Health. And the CAT and the TOT teams have recently been combined to a larger, more flexible unit so that we both can assess and respond and do triage and follow-up in a way that sort of works with where the community needs are. So just to,
Dr.
yes?
The screen is zoomed in where the text, we can't
Oh, cool.
text. So if you can fix it easily, that would be great.
I
But
can
if
fix
not,
it when I,
it just, I think, needs to zoom out.
okay, hold on, just give me a second. I'll finish up my answer.
Thank you.
I think the most important thing to know is the vast majority of Berkeley Mental Health Services actually do involve case management, and that the crisis response is actually a much smaller percentage of what we do overall as a system. I will move to the next slide, and then I think we'll be in better shape. How's that? Sorry, long week, long day.
Very nice.
It's good, Dr. Rose. Thank you.
All right, so question number 5 is, why has it been so difficult to staff the current team? And that's a good question. It's a big question. Sustainable staffing for this team has been a challenge for a bunch of reasons. 1, the position requires non-traditional hours, which includes nights, weekends, holidays, and the hours are 11:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. Again, not very popular hours. The position requires a very specialized skill set and by individuals who want to have a regular involvement with crisis, smaller subset of folks. The position requires staff members who want to have a close relationship with Berkeley Police, as the mobile crisis team has currently been designed as a co-responder model. The City of Berkeley hiring freeze that occurred in the COVID-19 pandemic has also made it challenging. The hiring process requires the use of lists that until recently were only renewed after an extended period, 12 to 18 months. We did recently partner with HR to make a continuous list for clinical positions, which is good and helpful. So now it's a current and open recruitment. That's been sorely needed. Limited ability for HR to do a comprehensive recruitment for us for such a specialized role. We are working on ways of identifying how we can build more capacity with that. There also have been more options available during and after the pandemic for clinical staff to work in remote settings that provide flexibility for family and self-care. Mobile crisis work is defined specifically as field work. So folks who could get remote telework have been able to get a lot more of that recently. Other providers, including community-based organizations, have brought their salary and benefits packages up to parity or close to parity with City of Berkeley. And that hasn't traditionally been the case either, which again makes it a lot harder to compete.
And I'll just add, as HHCS director, right now, two of the hardest positions to fill are sort of crisis-related mental health and nurses. So this is sort of a staffing shortage that is happening nationwide, and we're really experiencing it in the city and in Berkeley. So it's kind of a national problem. So I'll take the 6th question. How is mobile crisis activated? Oh, I see. I just totally messed this up. So I'm gonna go back and just read the actual question, even though you're gonna have to see this for 1 second. The question is, if staff if we can't staff the current team, what prospects might there be for expansion of the mobile crisis role? If we can't staff it, what are the process for expansion? Like that. So from our perspective, the general uncertainty of the future role of there's general uncertainty of the future role of mobile crisis versus the specialized care unit makes expansion discussions premature. A critical component of Council's omnibus package, which is what resulted in all of you being here, was to move toward having a specialized care unit that can respond effectively and de-escalate crisis without involvement of the police. This has been a significant priority for many community members, including crisis system users, for some time. And we are really working to honor this express need and expectation through our community engagement process and proposed model design. And here I am speaking as the SEU steering committee facilitator. That's our focus right now, and really building up and looking at what an SEU will look like. So our preliminary findings that there is a need for an SEU. We're awaiting reports that will come out at the end of this month, and that it, and around that SEU, that it is valued and treated on the same level as police and fire that responds to non-criminal mental health, substance use, or other behavioral emotional crisis. So the role of MCT, when we do stand up a specialized care unit, is unclear. And so expansion conversations are not something that we're having in the department or in the specialized care unit steering committee. So I just want to name that. That may be conversations that are happening here, but that's not our current charge. All of that said, if expanding the MCT was a priority for the city of Berkeley, we would develop a strategy that included recruitment, funding, and operating hours. Assuming that we are simultaneously talking about implementing the SEU, we would also have to develop clear rules and boundaries about how the two collaborate and where they do not, and how they collectively engage with the police. One thing that would be strongly rejected by the SEU steering committee, and I believe many of the community members who have advocated for the SEU, would be any model that prioritizes MCD or PD over the SDU. Not to say that those aren't also important, but that the SEU has to be an equal, integral, and trusted partner within the broad crisis response system if it is going to have a chance to make a significant impact on crisis in our community.
All right, and then I can just read number 7 out loud if that's helpful. So
yeah, I can move this too. Actually. Go ahead.
Okay, so the number 7 I have here on my list is how does inability to staff, I assume this is how does inability to staff up our teams affect our prospects for hiring other non-sworn reimagining functions? And that really depends on the function in general. The more hiring that can be done flexibly, the better the chances are for success. If hiring the other non-sworn reimagining functions were the top priority for the city, we would want to work with our HR department and city leadership to prioritize as best we can, while also meeting the other critical city hiring needs.
And then the last question relates to, is this the issue, the salary scale or the job functions or the hours, or do mental health responders have better opportunities with less stress and better hours in other prospective employment? We did respond to that earlier for the most part. So it's a mix of these and other issues. And like we said before, there are other opportunities where mental health crisis workers may have commensurate or better compensation for similar or less demanding work. Many workers may also need to commute to get a field position in Berkeley, and closer opportunities for similar work with similar pay are available now elsewhere. So those were the questions. Sorry about the sharing of my screen. But but hopefully you've received the answers that you asked for, and we're happy to answer any questions, additional questions about the mobile crisis unit.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Dangerfield.
Yes, thank you. I have a question that goes along with an observation that I've been struggling with as I've listened to countless presentations and have thought a lot about our reimagining efforts, and that concerns the staffing of crisis and alternative units. I know that there is a structure that's proposed that involves community-based organizations and like personnel being involved, but this seems to be at the crux of a lot of what at least I'm on the task force for, and that is to really pinpoint what we can do to change either the bureaucratic structure that winds up being a barrier to attracting and retaining qualified personnel to work effectively in this gap that we would otherwise be creating, if you will, with a reduction in force for the police department. They respond to things that they shouldn't. We all know that. And I'm not clearly needing to cover all of the things that police don't want to necessarily have to deal with, as we've sat now for close to 8 or 9 months listening to the various permutations. I'd like to know what recommendations can come out of the task force to help the mobile crisis unit or special response units, whatever we call them, in the end, to improve the retention and quality of the people who are a part of the effort, because I think they're critical. And I haven't really heard a good response. So if you could, as far as maybe weigh in on some of the recommendations you think we can make as a task force that might make your job easier in that recruitment and retention effort. I'm really anxious to hear what those might be.
So as staff, I'm really here to represent and share what the strengths and challenges are of the specialized care unit. And I think that as a task force, your role is to sort of hear some of the strengths and the barriers that we've presented, and with that, come up with recommendations for addressing some of the issues that you hear. As a staff, city staff, I'm really here to present the information and not interpretation or my take on what could happen. But I think that we've given you the information that could lead to more broader recommendations.
Thank you.
Commissioner Linton.
Hi. So I tried to ask the question in my questions, but let me go beyond what your answers were. The underlying premise here of this whole process is that we've dumped everything on the police. We want to take some of those functions away from the police. The approach of the consultant is that all of their tier 1 calls will be responded to by non-police. But I'm not seeing how any of these people are ever going to be hired in the context of, let's just say, city issues in terms of staffing, training, finding people, and in what time frame could any of these other functions be staffed by the city. So you said that, I was hearing that maybe the problem with staffing the mobile crisis response team is that because of its particular functions regarding and its connection to BPD, and maybe your answer is, well, if they're not allied with BPD, maybe there'll be more people interested in taking these functions. But I kept hearing, well, there are HR issues, there are HR issues. And I know cities have HR issues. I know cities have freeze issues and all of that. But if we're going to take functions away from the police, people have to have somebody to call. And how are we, and in what time frame do you think it's even feasible to talk about replacing the functions that we're currently sending to police, or even some of those, or even the tier 1 ones of the consultant, and be able to take those functions away from policing?
So I'm a director and more of a program oversight and manager, and I don't, am not administratively overseeing HR, some of those administrative functions. But what I will say is that I think that if there is a desire to do some work to troubleshoot how to address these issues, that would be, could be a way that people could commit to work together to figure it out. I'm not here in my role to say how they should figure out. I'm here to present what the strengths and challenges basically are of the mobile crisis team. So I'm not the person to ask about what to do and how to do it. That's a broader city administrative question. I will say that as we shared, working with police was a barrier potentially for some, and then there are other barriers as well. And I would imagine these barriers are not unique to Berkeley, but something that, you know, if the community wants to come together to resolve, that's something that could potentially happen. But that I'm not the expert in telling us how to do that or where that should be done.
So let me just take the opportunity then to make a somewhat gratuitous comment that we're spending all of this time, the consultant is spending all of this time and coming up with the possibility or the rationale for why alternative people should be responding to calls. But if we as a city can't hire these folks, none of this makes any sense. And I just want to make that clear. And it may be we can come up with great ideas, but if we can't implement them, they're no good. And I just want everybody to be understanding that we can't, people in the community need somebody to call. And if we say you're not going to call the police, or you shouldn't call the police, they got to have somebody. And so this has to be resolved in some way for any of this process to have any meaning whatsoever. So it may not be your problem, but it's certainly our problem.
Thank you, Commissioner Malvito.
I have a question, but I actually wanted to see if we'd be willing to have a discussion about what Commissioner Lindheim just brought up. I think it's really critical piece. I know that the mental health crisis unit that was installed in Oakland, I think, is going through some similar things where they're like it comes down to retention of staff and also compensation. And I'm wondering, Dr. Warhus or anyone on here who has any ideas about about what the challenges have been to retain staff in positions like this. What are the tools or trainings that we can provide or support with whatever iteration of this alternative comes out, whether it's the SEU or somewhat or an expansion of the MCT, or, you know, again, whatever comes out, like what are some of those things that have been identified as issues in retaining staff?
So this is Commissioner Malvito, not agendized as kind of a topic, and maybe it's something we can talk about going forward at another meeting. But I will say, having ran the HR department and many HR departments in many cities, recruitment and retention ebbs and flows, right? And right now, there's kind of a national shortage. As a matter of fact, the League of California Cities is doing a presentation next week that I'll be a part of. And it is talking about the staffing shortages that all cities are experiencing as a result of a number of factors. But I think based on the work that you're doing, I think your role here is to come up with what you think are the recommendations. And it's more than just hiring. Some of this could be revising existing job descriptions, all of it, it would be subject to working through with our labor groups, because all of this becomes meet and confer as you talk about what it looks like when we implement. So there are a number of steps in this process that still need to occur that will move us forward. But as it relates to, recruitment and retention, there are a number of factors. But right now, most cities are just experiencing just a shortage. Even the hospitals, they're in the same boat. They're experiencing a shortage of nurses. And it's just one of those things of supply and demand. We're not graduating enough people right now to help meet the demands that COVID has provided us over the last 2 years. It's truly grown. But I do think, again, just to keep us somewhat focused on our purpose here, we can have another conversation around that, but we're not done just with your recommendations. I think both Commissioner Lindheim and you both raise a very good point. There is kind of this implementation portion that we'll have to talk about, which is going to require us getting this in front of other audiences, so to speak, like the employees, like the labor groups, to really talk about what this looks like, and what job descriptions will be utilized to perform what functions in this new reimagining model. So that's what I have to offer you for right now around that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Spello. I guess maybe this is a sort of a supplemental question about this, Dr. Arhus. What has been like historically the staffing levels for the MCT as a sort of as an operating body in Berkeley? Like, how many people are able to respond at any given time to mental health crisis, not including the police?
I'm going to let Jeff answer that question since he's led the team for more directly.
Thanks, Dr. Vargas. So the general answer in the 16 years I've been with the city are that, when fully staffed, there are usually 4 full-time staff who are hired for the mobile crisis team, plus any number of hourly folks. And so right now we have 2 full-time staff who are still working, and we've got 4 hourly staff who can sometimes fill in shifts. When fully staffed, we can usually have 2 crisis workers who can handle different calls during the day. Operationally at night, we've required that folks go out in pairs for safety reasons. So between 5 and 10 p.m., we can usually only respond as a single unit, whereas during the day, we can respond as 2 separate units from 11:30 a.m. till 5 p.m.
I got it. Thank you. And based on what those numbers that you're describing, have you ever had to, like, what I guess, what's the proportion of calls that you've had to turn down because of staffing levels and the calls that you've been able to address? Like, do you have any numbers on that, or a ballpark even?
It's tough. We don't have good data on that. I could say anecdotally that typically having 1 unit available at all times is usually good for most days. But as you may know, crisis is feast or famine. Oftentimes there's a lot of things going on at once, or sometimes things are a little bit dry. So I don't have solid numbers to give you. This is the size team that's been running for many, many years. Again, mobile crisis here in Berkeley is the first in the nation, and therefore the oldest model.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And one last question. I have many more, but I don't want to take up too much time. But there was a mentioning of, what are some of the things that are not available in Berkeley, like currently? Like what does it look like when mental health crisis responders go out and meet with people who are experiencing, whether it's a mental health crisis or they just need to be triaged into different resources? Like what's offered? Like, and when I ask this question, I don't mean to say like, can you give me the spiel that you give people? Like, I mean to say, like, what are the resources that are available on the spot? And what are the resources that you can't give to people because there just simply is no inroad to them, whether it's shelter space, whether it's transitional housing. I'm wondering, what's being told to people who are on the ground experiencing these crises.
think you're asking a really big question, and it's hard to generalize.
Sure.
There are going to be different situations depending on what crisis someone is going through. Sometimes people will contact a crisis team, and their version of a crisis is different than somebody else's. Some people may be looking for a mental health service. Some people may be looking for housing. Some people may be looking for their family member or their friend to accept help when they're not ready for it. So I guess it's hard to really give you a good answer to encompass all of those things. I can say that there are a lot of referrals to community resources that are given out on the spot. I can say that on the spot, there is the ability to evaluate somebody and see if they are a danger to themselves or to others or gravely disabled. There's crisis counseling, there's problem solving. In crisis work, there's a lot of creative thinking and trying to figure out ways that people can get what they need. Again, I can't give a lot of specifics, but does that help answer your question?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. And I'm going to sneak one last one in here. Is this service available to people who are undocumented?
Yes, it's available to anyone who's in Berkeley, period.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hyde.
I really want to thank Jeffrey and Dr. Warhus for being with us this evening. These are really important answers. I noticed that some of the slides had some written answers and some of the slides have just a verbal set of information. All of it was fantastic. Do we have this presentation and everything that you guys have been able to tell us? So the answers to at least the written questions from the slides, do we have that on the RPSTF webpage? Is that archived so that we can go back and reread and really think hard about this stuff?
I can answer that. So yes, you have it. It's posted on the webpage and you were sent an email about a week ago with the same information.
Okay, great. Particularly the slides that contained a question that maybe, I think Jeffrey did a lot of answering on the fly. Have those answers been captured anywhere? I didn't see written answers to the ones that Jeffrey took.
Jeff is really great. Like, he should be on television because we were basically reading all of the
So it sounds like maybe not, but we would turn to the video, the recording of this meeting in order to rethink about and digest all the great stuff that Jeffrey said. Is that right?
If you're talking about post when we finished presenting, anything after that, you would go to the recording. But when we went through the questions, and I apologize for my staffu with the slides, because I tried to put that together at the last minute, don't ever do that. Everything before the Q&A is written down in your answers.
Excellent, great. I think this is just really crucial stuff for us to all understand, and I will definitely want to read it again. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much for writing all that good stuff down. I feel such a great sense of urgency about solving the tension that Commissioner Lindheim has pointed out, that we have to have a place to turn, which points the magnifying glass straight at, I suppose, the HR department. I'm not quite clear how everything segues, but it really feels like the hiring and the retention it couldn't be more urgent and just a blaring emergency at this point, that we're even discussing these things, but we could be a year or years out from being able to implement any of it. And that's making my head explode. I guess it's a question for LaTanya. What can we do to really shake the tree and loosen things up and get moving forward on this really incredibly urgent crisis? So that's one question. I've got one more.
So I think, Commissioner Hyde, I should probably give some thought to that and get back to you, because I really should talk with the HR department. As I mentioned to Commissioner Malvito, I think it's probably a separate subject, and we are more than happy to kind of, talk about it at your next agenda, if you think that that would be helpful, because I think you're getting more into the implementation portion of this whole process, and not so much where we're trying to stay focused right now. But as we move through, we will have to talk about what those job descriptions look like, whether they change, whether we create new ones. And then if we do create new ones, how do we target our outreach, right, to be able to attract individuals? I mean, we just put in some very good labor deals. So all of our employees have 3-year deals. So we're settled. We just settled that in June of 2021. We have raises taking us over the next 3 years. We have an excellent benefits plan. I mean, par none, the city of Berkeley's benefits are just about #1 out there. And that always shows up. We do regular class and comp studies. So we have a lot that we do as an employer. We have a wonderful benefits plan, recruitment, all of that wonderful stuff. It really is, I think, at this point, kind of supply demand, but it is something that we'll pay closer attention to. And like in 6 months, when we get to that point, we'll then be able to better identify and see what it is that we need to do that's not being done and how we can be creative in terms of getting folks. But right now, there is a shortage everywhere. I can't stress that enough. Every city I talk to, people are stealing from each other. That's what's happening right now. They're calling and saying, I have a vacancy here. Are you interested? And we're losing folks to other cities. And at the same time, folks are coming to the city, maybe not in some of these specific jobs. And so it's just something we'll have to pay attention to as we go forward.
6 months feels like a long time to wait. I know that every city probably moves slowly. And so maybe that's actually as fast, blazingly fast as any city has ever moved. But boy, as a citizen, that feels like a long time to wait. So one final question for you. Do the labor contracts that have just been agreed upon and won't need to be revisited for some number of years, do those contracts preclude the currently theoretical CERN approach, tiered CERN approach?
I have to take a look at that approach and just make sure that that's not anything that I don't think precludes us reimagining. They understand that we're reimagining, and oftentimes we do change job descriptions and lift up job descriptions as we go forward, because it is a management right, is what they call it, for us to identify what jobs will perform what task. So we're usually not precluded from creating new job descriptions.
Okay, excellent, because that would be so unfortunate if, we just made agreements and we had to spend years waiting for those to clear. And then I guess my final question is, since all of the cities are competing, what are other cities doing to successfully staff theirs? How did Denver break through and get the STAR program fully staffed, or Austin? Or, the folks in Eugene is a private scenario, but nonetheless, they still need in the range of the same skill set. So, what best practices have we looked at best practices of other cities that are seeming to be one step ahead of us on this hiring question?
Yeah, I don't know if other cities are one step ahead of us. I have to maybe not factually state that. The last regional vacancy report that I saw from about 9 of our local cities, we were all running about the same. Actually, Berkeley was just a little lower than some of our neighboring agencies. I mean, to have high vacancy rate right now is common. But again, I think what I'd like to do is just kind of refocus this. I think that's a topic that we probably need to do some research so that we're better prepared to be responsive. I don't want to take over the presentation, and what this agenda item was really for Dr. Varhus to be responsive to some of the questions that was sent to her around the mobile crisis team. I think that as we go forward, we can certainly circle back and have a little deeper conversation, and then have some data to bring you all around recruitments and our neighboring agencies and what things are looking like. So that's what I think is our better approach, Commissioner Hyde, for now. So we'll put a pin in that conversation and we will continue it at a later time.
Great. That feels urgent. And Chair Mizell and Vice Chair Chima, I'd love to have that agendized, whatever the process is for that. Final question. If there is an MCT response, Does it feel, I mean, we could always use more services in all areas, but Dr. Voorthuis, I would ask, do we have enough or any, in fact, sobering centers and non-5150 avenues for folks that find themselves in crisis?
We need to work on building those out as well. And I think the RDA, that report that comes out, that makes a recommendation around what an SCU will look like in Berkeley. We'll have something to say about that in our community engagement process. A lot of the perspectives of the people with whom were interviewed felt that there was a need for more of those resources. So we do leverage some Alameda County resources quite well. But you know, we are a unique community with lots of need, and additional resources could be, you know, are definitely a need. I do want to add one thing, because this was really focused on sort of the lack of staffing or the staffing challenges, and also just sort of, you know, the role of MCT. I just want to take a moment to just really praise my staff and Jeff in particular, because I know some of you went on some ride-alongs when mobile crisis was called. They really, really do excellent work. It is hard work. There are crises that we respond to that are just so difficult and hard and heart-wrenching, where it just feels like it's not enough. And there are others that are huge successes. And so I do want to just share that where they have been successful, these are really great people. And, you know, those of us who have kids who have had the best teachers, they know that their heart is in it. And that is the people that you need for this work. People who are just, they're committed, it is their life. And we do have a really great small, but when they respond, they really do excellent work. So I didn't want to leave without making sure to say.
I absolutely second that. I had the opportunity to see MCT at work on my particular ride along, and it was extraordinarily efficient and thoughtful and organized, and I was very impressed. So thank you to everyone on your side who's doing all this work and all this reimagining with us. Thanks.
Commissioner Upton.
I want to return to the 2 times that Dr. Voorthuis was asked what we might do to better staff our service for mental health calls, where we wouldn't necessarily have to have the police participate in that. And on both occasions, she said that, I'll repeat what she said on the second time it was asked, quote, "I'm not the person to ask what to do or how to do it. I'm not the expert," end quote. And I was struck by that. As I look at the organization chart of the city's administration, it appears to me that among its executives and high administrators, Dr. Voorthuis is exactly the executive who would be expected to have the answer to a question like that. So I wondered what could inhibit her from responding to that. And what I think of, I can't speak for her, of course, but what I think would influence me, if I had her job, I would be afraid to answer that question. Because anything I would say that would alert the police audience to the fact that someone in the city administration is thinking of ways that part of their work might go off to be done by other people, therefore reducing the number of full-time equivalent positions for police officers. Anything in that direction could be very dangerous to my economic health, to my retention of my job. I don't know if that's what was in Dr. Voorthuis's mind or something else, but that's the only thing I could think of. But I would point out that our commission doesn't have any kind of constraint of that sort. We don't have anything to fear from the police department about its protecting its turf by taking taking things away from us because we're not on the payroll. So I hope that we will take full advantage of our opportunities to express to the City Council what we think needs to be done to create positions where mental health emergencies can be dealt with independently of the police.
Vice Chair Chima.
Thank you, Nathan. I just want to add to the conversation because we're sitting here pretending as though all of these jobs are going to be in the city of Berkeley. No, many of these jobs are going to be in the nonprofit sector. So changing job descriptions, all of that, that's one side of the story. The city has its systems, it goes by its systems, it posts, it's wait. HR systems are not that different from one city to another city. On the community-based organization, just look at Cahoots. They're having a horrible time hiring people. We're going to be tested very quickly in Berkeley with the release of $1.2 million in bridge grants. Let's see how quickly those organizations who apply to do certain bridge services, how quickly they're able to hire and train and get people in place. So that test is coming in a month. So the whole other piece that we rarely talk about is equity in wages. A number of nonprofits are so underfunded right now that they're actually contracting employees so they don't have to pay healthcare. And remember when Bank of America tried to do that and how crazy we all went? I think it was Bank of America, 20 hours, you didn't have to pay healthcare. Well, the very same thing is happening in the community-based organizations in Berkeley. So when it comes to to retain people, even on the CBO side, we're going to have to invest pretty heavily to create some kind of equity between city salaries, city pensions, city retirements. So our nonprofit arena is actually, we have a lot of nonprofits in Berkeley, and we spend a lot of money on each nonprofit, as small or big, having its own infrastructure. There could be, many different models that the city could follow in terms of how the community provides services. So this question about looking at job descriptions and all of that, that conversation also needs to happen with the CBOs. Are you paying fair wages? Are you just paying the minimum wage that you're supposed to pay in your city contract because you're getting city money? Do you pay healthcare? To know how many hourly people are you using instead of hiring full-time union staff because some of the shops are unionized. So this conversation is much bigger. And if you read today's, I believe it was Daily Cal, has a whole article on what's going on in the Berkeley school system. There's such a shortage of teachers. And now that we have taken, I believe, the officers that used to be in the hall, a horrible time keeping the peace. Kids skateboarding, all kinds of threats, violence, all kinds of stuff is happening. So shortage of staff and shortage of staff in one unit, which is very specialized in Berkeley, is to me a small conversation. The bigger conversation is, what does workforce development look like in Berkeley for the future of Berkeley, and how do we attract workers and how do we retain them? It's not always wages. Sometimes, as Dr. Warhus said, you really have to believe in this work and want to do it. Responding to crises is not easy. Those of us who have seen mobile crisis team and respond to our shelters, our transitional houses, on the street, all of those places, it takes a lot. And with 2 years of COVID, many people have decided to change jobs, change industries. So this is really a nationwide conversation. We can bring it to Berkeley and say, well, I don't want to contradict Pamela, but 6 months is a very short time when you're trying to, it's going to take us at least until the middle of next year to hire our police chief. If we want the best, then it's going to take some time to get the best. Do we advertise in all the right places? I hope so. Do we steal from other cities? I definitely hope so. Alameda County steals from Berkeley all the time. Maybe we should have a pact with them that they can't do that for a few years. So if we're going to have this conversation, let's make sure that we have some actual facts that we're having the conversation about, and not our displeasure so much at why isn't it better? It isn't better because the conditions out there are different, and it's not just clinicians that's a shortage, nurses. Pick up any newspaper, there's shortage of workers in this country. There's all those ships that are not being loaded because there's unloaded because there aren't workers to unload the ships. I mean, so this is big stuff, folks, and the future of our city depends on it. So it's a serious conversation, but it's not just about mobile crisis and the kind of staff that mobile crisis needs. If and when SCU is running, that will be another challenge. We all know that. People are providing, outreach services now, providing other kinds of services. Some people are, as they're increasing hours, some of the workers are not coming back to their old jobs. So it's, that was a lot of information, but I felt like I had to share it because it's an important conversation for the future of our city.
Thank you, Boone. Commissioner Fine.
Yeah, I mean, initially, I thoroughly agree that we have to consider this in the context of COVID because the impacts are so severe. We've had first responders die, get sick, have long COVID, get burned out, some drop out of the market, some are recovering, and some are at temporary agencies to get jobs because they're paying twice as much money as full-time positions that they occupied before. So it's made human resources put them in a terribly difficult position. And then you have your union collective bargaining contracts that you have to comply with. And so I just can't imagine what it's like right now trying to fill many, many jobs. But one thing I feel in this context is that until we put behavioral health equal to on par with policing, with fire and EMT, we are not going to deal with this problem properly. And we can talk about it in bits and pieces, and we can talk about it only with the city of Berkeley, but this is also part of the larger Alameda County because our mental health and substance use services come from both the city and the county. And that goes for the crisis call centers, the crisis lines, the first responders, the medical triage, the mobile crisis team with the police, what will become the SCU, behavioral health urgent care, outpatient intensive, 23-hour evaluation and crisis response, residential crisis care, inpatient admissions, and transport. I mean, it's a very big system. And it's something like the Mental Health Commission is just beginning to deal with. We're waiting on the RDA reports to come in so we can really have an overarching comprehensive conversation about this and be able to link it up with what Ms. Bellows talks about is job descriptions that can actually speak to exactly what people need to do in order to give people help in the field. So, we're in a really fluid time right now. We have a reimagining process. We have an SCU process. We have a mobile crisis police team. When I look at the SCU collaboration with municipal and community stakeholders, I think that's very effective. I think that there are many people on the reimagining team here who do so much good work in the community, but we're in the midst right now. And we're going to just have to deal with a little bit of uncertainty as we sort through these things. And I'm just hoping that one, we look at things from a systems level, and that included in that is looking at equities and disparities and social determinants of health. And what was it? In the second place, I do really appreciate the honest conversation, because if we flesh it out now and unpack it, we don't have to deal with these problems later on in November or whatever, because we've taken that time right now. And I'm really grateful to Dr. Warhos and Jeff for coming tonight and going through this. And we don't always see eye to eye, but we have good, meaningful conversation that's getting really productive results. It's going to take some time. And I think Una tells us that many times. She's been here since the 1970s, and she sees how long it takes programs to get up and running and to become effective. But I think we're on our way. We're getting through it.
Thank you, Commissioner Fine. If there's any other questions for Dr. Varhus, Mr. Beal? Okay, seeing none, we can go ahead and move on. But of course, Dr. Varhus and Mr. Beal, thank you both for being here. I know Commissioner's really been awaiting your presentation and answers, because of how important both of your role is in this whole process and in any hope of really reimagining public safety. So thank you for your current work, and certainly the work hopefully we can do and help together in the future. So appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Okay, task force. Move on to discussing scheduling another meeting in October. Ms. Cole, if you want to lead that, or if I could, either way.
That's for you, Chair.
Okay.
I'll support you if you need me.
Okay. I believe last time we discussed potential dates, there was an issue with that Thursday. And if task force members can remind me and enlighten me on any issues in terms of that week that starts with the 25th.
The Thursday is the Mental Health Commission meeting at 7 p.m.
Yeah, and three or four of us are on that commission.
Okay.
But also the other question, Nathan,
yes,
is that maybe we should wait till we have the reports to have our October meeting. Get the report, have a couple of days to go through it, and then really have our first, however we design our feedback and how we're going to do that could be our first meeting in November. So maybe we'll meet 3 times in November. But
looking for suggestions. That could definitely work.
Just FYI, so keeping in mind November is Thanksgiving and whatnot, so that might conflict for some commissioners and staff support. So it may be an option. I think we talked about maybe working at the subcommittee level, which is the option, just throwing it out there for you to think about and consider.
Okay, Ms. Cole, are there, I guess just in general, are there staffing issues in terms of that before the week of Thanksgiving at all?
Possibly.
Yes, there definitely
yes,
would
there
be.
is. Yes,
Ms. Cole. And so what we're looking at, Chair, is the 27th, the 28th, the 29th is a Friday. I don't know how you all feel about that. Then we come into November 1st, but I believe the draft report is going to be submitted to you all. Was it by the 29th or by the 28th? So I guess you have one of two options. You can have one meeting where you collect the entire task force together one last time in October. And then you could break out in, maybe a smaller group of subcommittees for the month of November as you work through the report. Or you don't have to schedule another meeting since it's so tight, and just begin to formulate your task force, your subcommittees now, and then parse out the work once the report is provided to you all on Thursday, Friday. It's up to you. And I guess we have to think about what you'd like to see at this additional meeting that you're scheduling, if the staff still owes you any presentations or anything. And
Yes,
Frances Ho, I think Commissioner Ho wanted the task force to know that she is unavailable on, let's see here.
October 28th.
Yes. She sent forth her availability and she's unavailable on the 28th as well. So just to factor that in.
Okay, so we're not going to do that Thursday.
If Cheryl or David are in the room, are we just going to be handed the report, or are they going to do a presentation of the report?
So the report will be
Thank you.
will be sent to the city, and then the city will distribute it to you. So there isn't a based on the timeline, I think there isn't a presentation planned, because I think also considering that we have, 3-4 sub-reports and preliminary reports that we have presented, that I don't think that there is a presentation for the final.
Okay.
Commissioner Austin, do you have something?
Yes, I want to strongly support Commissioner Chima's proposal that we should be sure to find time and means for us as a commission to comment to the city council on the report that's going to be prepared. After all, that report will be the main subject, the culmination of what the city council requested. And if they're going to pay, if the council is to pay any real attention to our work, it will be in the form of looking at what we say about the report. I think, I hope we will have quite a bit to say about the report. And so I want us to be sure that we have the time and opportunity to do that.
Yes, I think those are really important points. And yes, we'll certainly have the opportunity either, and again, I'm waiting to see the report in its structure to make a clear plan, but certainly we'll have the ability to have our own feedback and have that presented separately. And as Ms. Bello mentioned, have that opportunity also in front of council to stress those points of agreement and differences, of course. So I know that's critical, and it's critical for our role as a task force. I mean, we're right at that point where either we get the report and we're really going to do something, or we're not. And my plan is that we will, and I know you're on board for that as well, Commissioner Opton. So yes, we will have our feedback, and we will have our voice in it as well.
So, Chair, did you want to meet the last week in October to discuss a plan for recommendations or otherwise?
Yeah, because I'm thinking on the fly right now, but okay. My thought was, there would be a meeting so we could, maybe the reports just come out, but maybe that's not to mean we're having that discussion yet, but we're laying out exactly, how we want to do it, and being certain, really surgical about, what we're going to respond to, who's responding to what, how do we want that to look like, what method are we going to use to send the feedback? Because, unfortunately, with the Brown Act, we're kind of constrained. I mean, we could probably do it over email in a week, but, we can't. So we'll need a meeting. But that's my thought process. I don't know if other folks have a different thought.
I think that October meeting seemed now it's time to roll up our sleeves and whatever else we do in this country and get to work. Is that we schedule a meeting the end of October, and let's see how things progress. Maybe the report will come out a day ahead. We don't know, but there, at least as a whole task force, we don't break any rules by having our discussion around, okay, so these are the sections of the report. Maybe we can get a table of contents and we can see what sections the report will be written in. And we say, okay, police and budget, here's your sections. And we've been meeting religiously every Tuesday and we'll continue to do that. And then we take our piece. We don't break any Brown rule. we're at 8 members, and we go to work on it. And then at one meeting towards the end of November, all the subcommittees come back together as a full task force and have a full discussion about which subcommittee like the recommendations of Nick Jr., which ones we want to add, which ones we disagree with. And that discussion could happen towards the end of November. And then we'll all be ready December the 2nd. And then, we don't know what the council will do. The council might send it to the city manager and say, come back with an implementation plan and tell us what the dollar amount is going to be after they've had all their questions answered. So this is going to go on for a while. But those 2 meetings, if it makes sense to the rest of the folks attending tonight, I think could be, we would actually be doing work.
Yes. Okay, so let me just go through that last week of October, and if we want to do a different plan, we of course can discuss that.
Nathan, public comment, please, on the last item.
Yeah, sorry, thank you, Vice Chair Shima. After we finish this option, then we'll take public comment, if that's okay with you. So the option, just keep in mind, Chair, that we have council on the Tuesday, which is the 26th.
And then I have PAB on the Wednesday.
On the Wednesday, my goodness. And so I guess the option could be, sounds like we're narrowed down to that Thursday.
But
What if you did it at 5, like 5 to 7?
I could do that I think I could do that on Wednesday. I don't know if that runs into any other meeting.
Make a motion.
All right. Well, if there's an issue, I waited. Okay. Let me motion to. And again, folks, if we want to discuss more meetings, we can as well. But let's get something on the calendar. So
sorry.
Yes.
Isn't the report only coming out on Thursday?
I thought I asked Cheryl if we could get it.
Could we get it on Wednesday?
It's supposed to be, right now, it's supposed to be submitted on Friday, the 29th. I can keep posted on sort of, if it's done earlier, if it's like, I can keep you posted on that.
Okay, would it be safer just for us to schedule the week after?
But Nathan, then when will we have the discussion about how we're going to respond? Who's going to respond? Once the report comes, we don't have a system in place in the task force as to how we will provide feedback. And that we could have that conversation in two weeks. Oh, it is 2 weeks. In the 29th. But if people don't want to have that conversation and just want to receive the report and then figure out how in 30 days we're going to respond, that's the task force's will.
So, but are you thinking, and sorry, I have to ask if it's possible, like we get just like an outline of what the sections are going to be and discuss that before the report gets released?
Yeah, like a table of contents. So it says police budget, implications of cuts to police. You cut 12 patrol, you get this many savings, but these are the implications. I mean, if we would even know how the report is going to flow, then at least we would know which subcommittee takes which piece. That community engagement takes community engagement, alternatives takes alternatives, police and budget takes police and budget. So at least we would have that in place. So when the report comes, we know exactly who needs to meet with whom and start doing our responding.
Yep. Let me see.
It's an idea. It's an idea, but that's the only one I can come up with right now.
Cheryl, hang on 1 second, Cheryl. So I'm thinking, Chair Mizell, that Vice Chair Chima is recommending like a planning meeting on the 28th. So maybe you could get it done within a couple hours, and staff could support you in terms of framing out what that agenda looks like. But it sounds like that might be a good time to have a planning meeting. Then that way, when you do get the report, you've had your planning meeting and you recognize how you'll disperse the work.
That totally makes sense. And this was like, Cheryl, does that sound at least plausible as something that can happen?
Yes, and yeah, and I think what I was just going to follow with is that I will get for you whatever information I can to Vice Chair Chima's point of kind of how to help you decide who's going to do what and how to address your feedback. I'll get that to you, and if it's okay, I can get that to you in email and send it to the city manager's office to distribute. Cool.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so I think where we're at now is we can't do the 28th because of several conflicts. I can't do at least past 7 on that Wednesday, but I could do before 7. And then Tuesday we have council, and I'm not sure what's on Monday. I imagine there's something on Monday. So I'm going to go ahead and motion that we schedule a meeting on Wednesday, October 27th, starting at 5 p.m. As you know, obviously we'll see exactly what the agenda will be, but as largely a planning meeting for the final report, the draft version of the final report, I should say. Yeah, I guess that's my motion.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? And of course, there'll be lots of further discussion, but at this point. Okay, seeing none, I'm sorry, Commissioner Fine, did you have something?
No, I was just going to say yes to the motion.
Okay, great.
She knows she's first. Commissioner Fine. Commissioner Jigu, Vice Chair Chima,
Yes.
Commissioner Blake, Commissioner Lindheim, Commissioner Ghosh,
Yes.
Commissioner Hyde,
Yes.
Commissioner Malvito,
Yes, but I can't confirm that I will be there that evening.
okay, thank you. Chair Mizell,
Yes.
Commissioner Upton,
Yes.
Commissioner Moon,
Yes.
Commissioner Harger, Commissioner Diaz, Commissioner Letzker.
Yes, but like Commissioner Malvito, not 100% sure I'll be able to make it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ho. Commissioner Dangerfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, we'll, on our end, the Vice Chair and I, we'll certainly do our best as we have meetings with staff and Nick Jr. to keep you updated on, the either proposed structure of how to do it, and then obviously that can help as a primer for our conversation on the 27th. Alrighty, we're at subcommittee. Well, no public comment.
Thank you. Okay, first we have Carol Marasovic. You should be able to speak, Carol.
So this is public comment on the presentation by Dr. Varhouse and Buell. There was absolutely no recognition when discussing unmet needs of the lack of community mental health models for persons in crisis. And this is despite that the Department of Justice has written a scathing report after an investigation of Alameda County not having these models, including Berkeley, so that persons do not have to go to John George or Santa Rita, because they can go to models, community models in their own community that are far less punitive. And Disability Rights California has also filed litigation regarding the community model, lack of community models here. These are not new issues. The State Oversight and Accountability Commission has, over a several-year time period, released funding for models such as crisis stabilization programs, such as peer respites. Some of these Berkeley could have applied for independently, as they have an independent mental health division, or they could have applied in partnership with the county, but we never apply. Just as Berkeley could be applying for mobile crisis funds now under the American Rescue Plan Act and has not done so, and could have also applied for monies under the innovations under the MHSA. Santa Clara County applied for mobile crisis monies under that. As far as the measure of impacts of when mobile crisis is on duty and not on duty, that was not thorough at all. A few years back, I had sent for PRAs over 5 years, 3 times, and was able to show when mobile crisis was not on duty, the number of 1056s, which are suicide-related calls that the police were coming out at. These are stats that could have been included in the presentation, and I have so much more to say, but my time is running out. And mobile crisis has been the star of Berkeley mental health. They're excellent. And I just want to conclude with saying that I've observed them dozens of times, and the police have always been in the background and there for support, while it's the clinicians who have taken the lead. And if we can't find clinicians for that, how are we going to find clinicians for the SCU? And yes, you do have to pay people properly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Next chair, we have Kelly Hammergren.
Yes, I guess I'll have to watch the tape, but did I understand this correctly? That you're not going to be able to see the report until it's been approved by the city manager, because it has to go to the city first? So will that report? Can you hear me?
Yes, Kelly, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. So is this correct that you're not going to be able to see the report until after the city manager's office has approved it and released it to you? That's it. That seemed to be really not what this task force is about.
Are you done? Okay. Just to clarify, I think that they were mentioning that the report will come to the city manager's office so that we can disseminate to the task force as co-secretaries. Next, we will have Emily. You should be able to speak.
Thank you. I just had a quick process, wanted to make sure I understood the scheduling that currently there, and I know you guys don't answer questions, but maybe Ms. Cole can, but it seems there are no meetings scheduled and no full meetings of this body scheduled in November. And so at this point, the only time the public would be able to hear the full commission's response to the report would be at the city council special meeting, or will there, I'm just curious if there would be some scheduled meeting in November. I see Ms. Chima nodding. There might be something before the council special meeting where we could hear everybody's collected feedback to the full report. But thank you all for figuring all of this out. I'm done.
I certainly cannot speak for the task force, but just in terms of my thoughts, there'll certainly be a meeting, but I do want to discuss with staff about the potential challenges we could run into November in terms of the date, and obviously with the whole task force, the potential challenges, but we'll have to have a meeting after that October 27th meeting.
So next we will have Steve Martineau. You should be able to speak. Steve, I think you're on mute.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, with respect to difficulty in staffing an SCU, the question I had for Warhus and the staff was, what's the salary that people would get? Because it would seem to me that if this is an office to replace police doing jobs that they shouldn't be doing, that health professionals should be doing. They should be getting the same pay as the police. And another thing that occurred to me is that the difficulty in getting people to work as employees for the city does raise the question, do these people really think that the city is a good moral and ethical employer to work for? The general difficulty that cities have in hiring staff might indicate that that might be a general problem. And so it occurs to me that one of the things that could be presented or proposed with respect to hiring is, rather than just being ordinary employees, that a co-op be set up of professionals who would handle the task of being first responders to emotional and mental crises, that could make up their own rules, train each other, hire each other, and be a body that would take responsibility for this as a co-op, and that would make its own scheduling, its own rules, and so forth and so on. That is, if you face this difficulty, then one of the things to do is to think outside the box. Thank you.
Chair Mizell, that is the last for public comment.
Okay. Moving to subcommittee reports.
Can I ask a clarification about the schedule?
Yes.
I thought we would have our November monthly meeting like on the second, whatever, Thursday of the month. 11th. We're not gonna have that. That's not scheduled for November.
As far as I understand, we will have that meeting as scheduled. I think in terms of if we have any other meetings,
okay,
you know, at least on my end, I want to hear from staff and the concerns still brought up. But to the extent that I have control, we'll have that meeting on the 11th, because that's when we usually be expected to have a meeting.
okay, yeah. It felt like we were not bringing us all together in November, so I just wanted to. I was confused by that. Thank you.
Chair Mizell, and I don't know if this is an issue, but it is Veterans Day, so I don't know whether city staff, and I don't know. Yeah,
I guess that's the other issue, huh?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Lutzer. That is the other issue. Well, there's a couple things going on. One, we'll be preparing for the submission to the city clerk of all the reports and coordinating that. We'll be working with Nick Jr. because they'll be doing all of their kind of community meetings, which will require a lot of movement and posting and information around that. And then you're right, that actual Thursday is a holiday for city workers. And then after that, we run right into that following week submitting to the city clerk's office. And then we are away on for the Thanksgiving break. And then we come back after that Thanksgiving break, and then we are having that special meeting. That's how we have it scheduled thus far. So I do think, as the chair has indicated, we kind of need to talk offline and figure out the scheduling. And work with the chair and the vice chair, as we've done. Staff has done that kind of regularly. We've tried to stay pretty close with the chair and vice chair to make sure that we can get the needs met. So we'll have to do that again, because it's getting even trickier as we start folding in all of the fall holidays along with the work we're trying to complete. So that's kind of where we're at right now, Commissioner Ghosh. So we'll have to get back to you around that.
Thank you. Okay, subcommittee reports. First from, and I guess we should agendize that name change, but for now, the Policing Budget and Alternatives to Policing Subcommittee.
and we have to take a full vote to change the name. And now I think I'm seeing a different name for the alternatives one, but Margaret will have to correct me if I'm wrong. So our apologies that we forgot to agendize a vote to change the name of the police budget and alternatives to policing. But we've reduced our work to policing and budget. So next time, let's please take a full vote. And we might want to rename some other subcommittees at our next meeting, depending on what that table of contents looks like. So do you want to hear from police and budget?
Yes.
Okay. We had, a very good, lively discussion. And while we're aware that we're waiting for the report, our expectations for that report are extremely, extremely high, because this particular subcommittee really is the subcommittee that will have to look at information around what is the appropriate budget for the city, for BPD, what are the appropriate number of officers, who does what. That's a big chunk of work. And so we're hoping that we will get a lot of detail, and we will have Nick Jr.'s recommendations, and that we're just in a wait and see mode. And I would like, if this is a request from me, if people would at least send to Shamika and Miss Bellows your name and the number of hours you might be able to spare in November to get all our feedback in. And so we know that somebody's available for 4 hours of writing, someone's available for 24/7. I'm getting more into the process that we're going to use and how many hours it's going to take to actually, respond in the most honest, appropriate, I don't know whether the word is appropriate or not, but from the integrity that we all have, that also shows up in the final report. What that looks like, I don't know yet. But so looking for volunteers. And we could prep in the next few weeks by reading the reports that have been released so far and start looking at, are there any recommendations in there that we have this set of questions for? CERN keeps coming up, other things. There are things in the reports that have been sent by Nick Jr. that I think we should all be very, very familiar with, so that we're able to move forward even a little faster. That's it. Anybody else from the committee want to add?
I think you summed it up.
Yep.
Community engagements. Okay.
We didn't meet.
Yeah. Okay. Improve and reinvest.
Do we want me to talk? You want to talk? Who wants to talk?
I don't know if Hector's here, but go ahead, Margaret. We had the meeting today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We really, worked on unpacking the kind of information that we've gained from the consultants in their reports, particularly the new and emerging models of community safety report and the different proposed investments that are recommended in the community, from gun violence to other sorts of programs. We did talk a lot about the Tier 1 dispatch and the CERN and the need for a lot of clarification there to understand exactly how it's service oriented and not connected to policing. Also, we've done some research. I had located a Urban Institute report which discusses the notion of community investment. And we're really taking a look at what that means and how it can manifest itself including with the different programs that are recommended by Nick Jr. But we're just really trying to see what's out there right now so that we have a lot to work with, not only from other research reports, but also by looking at the programs that we have in Berkeley and how those programs may need further investments. So I imagine that we'll be able to write really substantive recommendations, but we're kind of in an information gathering process and a process asking for a lot of clarification right now. And then we'll be able to start unfolding things, particularly, I mean, we've got to see obviously the draft final report to do anything. And does anybody else want to share?
I guess I just wanted to ask a question. Sorry, my camera's off. I'm having some issues with my webcam. And this is I know part of the subcommittee report. I'm not sure if this is possible, but I'm wondering if Cheryl or David have any thoughts on the. Well, I remember when we were first presented the alternatives report for Berkeley. I asked the question of surveillance technology, whether it was considered an alternative or not. And I think I got a verbal response to that it was not, based on the research that you all had done. And I'm wondering if there is anything written that will be included in the report that references that specifically. And I asked that given that, this is part of sort of the alternatives discussion and what is an alternative and what is not an alternative.
And I can find that out for you. I don't have that answer for you right now, but I can find that out for you and share that.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, if not, thank you. All right, is that the end of the agenda?
Great meeting, Nathan.
And
Thank you. And
and in under 3 hours.
Thank you. Oh, what a relief.
Alrighty. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate the work, appreciate the productive meeting, and look forward to the next step in the work. So I'll motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Fine.
Yes.
Commissioner Jigu, Vice Chair Chima.
Yes.
Commissioner Blake, Commissioner Lindheim, Commissioner Ghosh,
Yes.
Commissioner Hyde,
Yes.
Commissioner Movito,
Yes.
Chair Mizell,
Yes.
Mr. Upton,
Yes.
Commissioner Moon,
Yes.
Commissioner Harger, Commissioner Diaz, Commissioner Lutzker, Commissioner Ho, Commissioner Dangerfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Do we have
you.
Commissioner
so much.
Lutzker's yes recorded?
Have a good night. Thank you.
My bear wishes you good night.
Yes, we do, Chair. Thank you.
All right,
Good night,
beautiful.
everyone.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you so
Good
much.
night. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.